All right, guys, so I want to preface the video by saying that any complaints that you're hearing in this video are just simply frustrations from the perspective of a person who wants to do a bunch of different builds at tier 3. I don't want to be stuck playing a few viable builds. I want to play fun and interesting builds at end game. So that's where a lot of the frustration comes from. Be advised, though, the game is being developed. It is in beta. The developers have jobs outside of developing this game as well. They have to feed their families, right? They are actively developing this game. This game is being developed. They are patching things. They are working on it. So anything I'm saying can be fixed in the future and may even be balanced in the future. So don't take this as the game is not good. Take it as the game is being developed. And if you hear any frustrations in this video, it's just real talk for you, as well as hopefully helping you build a AoE fire mage that may fit in your party, right? With that being said, guys, hopefully you enjoy this video. Hopefully the developers don't take any of this to heart. If there's any complaints that they don't like, I'm sorry. I just want to see change, and I know you guys are limited in what you can do, and that is okay. So continue doing what you're doing, and hopefully you guys, the new guys who are playing this game, can also learn to enjoy this game. You don't start to see issues in this game with balancing until you get to level 70 plus, and even then you may not face the same problems I am, because your team build and makeup may be different. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoy the video. See you guys in game. All right, guys, so let's talk about the fire mage. Now, there's a bunch of different ways you can build a fire mage and it will do very well. There's a melee fire mage build with lots of AoEs. There's a tanky reflect damage type of fire mage, and you also have your standard caster fire mage, just giant AoEs. They kind of nerfed and buffed the fire mage within the last patch. Meteor used to do much more damage. However, now it can still kind of do the same amount of damage, but only if the mobs that you're targeting are rooted in place for the full duration of the burning on the ground, right? Now, prior to this patch, with the gear that I had before, I was able to buff more fire damage and percentage fire damage on my mage. I was doing upwards to around 70 to 98k in one blast, AoE wise, as long as they were max heat. Now you're doing about 30k with the meteor, and then the damage over time effect is doing about 25 to 30k as well. Can go a little higher, but it's a lot less damage. Now, as people will say, you can use tanks to tank in the fire. The problem with that, though, is when you get to later tiers in the game, your tanks aren't going to survive too many hits. However, there are ways around that with warlocks that can, dark ritual and keep them alive, or keep them at least at 1 HP. But that's a lot of setup and can be inconsistent, especially with teleporting mobs and stuff like that. There are quite a few different builds, but I'm going to show you what's kind of been working for me. I personally am going to be going down to 3-man parties if I continue to play this game, because 6-man parties just are obsolete. Until the balancing in in-game gets better, 6-man team tier 3 plus is just a lot more RNG and kind of not really worth it. So let's get into the build. We have 19 points into fire and 13 into lightning. And the reason we're going 19 into fire is I want to hit all my big fire damage abilities. I also want big AoE abilities. And we're also going to get more damage over time as well. We're getting Burning Reach, which is going to give us one more range on all of our abilities. And we're going into Hothead 1 and 2 for 20% extra damage. Firestarter, which is going to give 2 stacks of heat at the beginning of the battle, which is nice because that's guaranteeing you're getting at least 10% extra damage for all mobs that are in the area. We run Fireball. This is actually a very high damage ability, and it has a very good blast radius. As mobs start to, get closer together, you're going to be doing a lot more damage to them as you start to funnel them into whoever your main tank is, whether it's a vampire monk or any type of physical or high HP tank that can kind of pull everybody in. This Fireball is going to help do a lot of extra damage. Now, we also spec into Fuel for the Flames. Now, this is going to increase your damage by a lot. As you can see, it's going to go up to 55% more damage. And then you're going to spend 100% more mana, but that's not a big deal, to be fair. We also have Lasting Flame, which is going to let your heat stacks stay on the targets for much longer. Now, this is crucial for fights that are going to be lasting a lot longer than you intend, which is more common now, especially with the rework to the bosses. The developers are going in the right direction with the rework on the bosses. However, they have to do more for your characters. HP-wise, characters, if you're full DPS, you're always getting one shot. Unless you have some type of weird gimmicks or you're running more than one Warlock. Healers aren't really viable currently in the game. These are some of my major complaints currently in the game. So it takes away a lot of the build diversity from you and I and anyone else who's playing. And it's not as fun to play the game when you can't try out a bunch of different stuff and only a few things are viable for end game content. All right. Now we'll keep carrying on, guys. Sorry for that. We have Flash Fire. Now this is pretty cool because this is going to reduce all of your cooldowns on your fire spells by 1. It's going to make your Meteor a 3-turn cooldown instead of a 4. It's going to make your Meteor Shower a 4-turn cooldown instead of a 5. And these are both very big damage dealing effects. Now the Meteor will also leave fire on the ground where it's hitting. Now this is a very heavy hitting fire damage AoE. It lasts for quite a few turns, and you will definitely notice the damage on mobs, especially if they're staying in there. And as I said before, the damage is roughly, with my current build, before additional fire damage and percentage fire damage on my armor, we were doing roughly around 30-40k a tick. And then the meteor damage was, roughly around that as well. Pretty cool. Pretty good damage. They reworked this because it was not as effective as people were expecting it to be. And I think it's going in the right direction. I do think that casters really need a big buff, especially if people want to be able to play the game for the longevity. For tier 3 plus or pushing higher levels, there has to be more than just fire percentage damage and might that is increasing damage on your casters. If they don't add or balance the casters in a different way, then you're going to see nothing but melee pushing the higher end content, and or not really higher end content, but higher levels of tier 3. Which means your casters become irrelevant and not very many people will be playing them, which isn't as fun, in my opinion, because people don't want to be stuck in one build, right? Next cool thing is Meteor Shower. Now, this thing is pretty cool. This is going to give you 15% more damage on a large area on any mobs that are in there. So usually you will open up with this and then follow up with a meteor and or a fireball, and that's going to increase your damage by a metric crap ton. Very cool ability. Honestly, I like the Fire Mage a lot. It's probably one of my favorite builds out of my casters. Outside of Lightning, Lightning's really cool too. You just see so much damage on the Lightning Mage. And you honestly, with the Lightning Mage and the Fire Mage, you can get a lot of build diversity once you start to hit tier 3 gear, because you can start min-maxing your stats. And at a certain point with gear, you're always going to have max crit, and then you can kind of go into more raw damage, which is really, really cool. Now, another cool thing is the Avatar of Flame. This will also crit every turn as well. So, as you can see here, it's doing 246 fire damage to the target per turn. So, every person that has a stack on them is going to take at least 246. Now, when you have 10 stacks, this is going to be the equivalent of a meteor strike, just a little bit under, in between. So every turn, if you have 10 stacks of heat, you're going to be doing roughly around 30-40k damage. So you can see there can be a lot of damage that the Fire Mage can put out. The problem is that monsters, when you're in a larger group, have so much HP that a Fire Mage becomes irrelevant. Once you get to like 70 plus, it's not irrelevant, it's just the damage is very lackluster compared to your melee counterparts. Now, your best in slot weapon, or weapons, depending on what you're doing, is going to be the Ember Knight's Might, which is a two-handed sword. It's going to be more for your melee AoE damage dealers, because this one gives you a 15% chance on strike to cast Detonate, which hits really, really hard. As well as what I like to use personally is going to be the Emberstone Staff. This one's really cool because you have a 20% chance whenever you're doing damage to cast Burning Ground, which Burning Ground actually does very similar damage to the Meteor. Actually, it is the exact same damage as the Meteor. This is basically giving you a free proc on your fireballs and on your meteor showers, which is basically turning all of your fire damage dealing spells into a meteor. It's really cool. Really awesome damage, especially early on. When you're doing tier 1, tier 2, this Fire Mage is going to do some massive work. Trust me. Especially if you can get your hands on a tier 2 Emberstone Staff. Early on, if you're able to score that, you're going to be able to gear up a lot of your guys in tier 2 gear fairly easy. I'm telling you, it's insane. One thing we did forget to go over, which we're going to go back just a wee bit. We're going to go back to the lightning. We didn't go over lightning skills. So lightning skills, we kind of spec into Dazzling Darts. This is going to give us a little bit extra crit damage for when our fire spells are down. Also, when we are casting this, it's going to give us a chance to recharge. Every time you cast a spell, you get a 33% chance to refund the mana cost and lower the cooldown of any of your spells by 1. This is kind of why we spec into lightning instead of some of the other builds. It's because it's giving us more uptime on our spells, right? We also get the 13% more crit from Stormbringer 1 and 2 put together. We also get a Teleport Self, which can get us out of harm's way if we are in that. You know what I'm saying? If you're in trouble and you need to get out of there, or you need to get somewhere further ahead so that you can reach the person that everyone else is attacking, this Teleport Self is amazing for that. We also do Gathering Storm, which is going to increase our maximum mana by 20%. I don't tend to go into intelligence any higher than the max that you need for the maximum spell range. There's no reason to do any more than that, because you should have enough mana, hopefully, to last through your fights, and with the mana potions, that should help you out quite a bit. We also go into Energy Shield, which may be able to save you if you do end up taking a hit. 50% of the damage is going to just go to your mana instead of your health. That's pretty solid. Another thing that we run is Heavy Rains. The reason we run into Heavy Rains is because intelligence grants us, 0.1% crit hit chance and 1% crit damage. So if you're running 75 of that, you're getting quite a bit of crit chance and crit damage. And depending on what you're running, you may be even higher than that, right? If you got a tier 3 weapon or tier 3 armor, a lot of that is just going to have an abundance of intelligence, which is just going to further increase your damage output, which is pretty awesome. And then the other thing that we like, and the biggest reason we go into Lightning with most, and if not all, Mage builds is because of Conduit. Conduit gives you an additional turn every turn, so you get to cast 2 spells. That's insane and helps out a lot with killing a lot of low health mobs, and or putting stacks of heat and or stacks of shock on all the mobs around you. So very, very cool. Now let's go back to the items again that are best in slot, and we're going to go over helmets. All right, guys, so the Ember King's Will is going to be your best in slot chest piece, and the reason for that is it's giving you an Aura of Flame, which is going to help you further damage mobs as they're coming into you. You can teleport into them. It's going to deal them damage. It's also going to provide additional stacks of heat. On top of that, it's going to give you primarily Might and Vitality. Might is the main damage increaser outside of your fire damage percentage and plus fire damage. Might is going to give you 1% to all of your spells damage over time. So the more might you have, the more damage you're going to be outputting. And just overall, once you get tier 3 of this, you're going to notice a significant amount of damage increase for your Fire Mage. Now, this is the best in slot, in my opinion. The next helmet that I want to look at, it's a little easier to get than the Ember's Will, is going to be your Flame Hat. Now, the Flame Hat, very easy to get. It drops off of Fire Mages and the Forge Master. Forge Master's pretty easy to beat as well. So we're going to move on to the chest plates. Now, the Forge Master's links are very good. Now, the Forge Master's links give you the Fire Shield, which means you're going to be taking a lot less damage. You're also going to be returning damage if you do end up getting hit. And the Forge Master's links also has insane might. Like, it's got a 5 compared to the 3 that is on the Flame Vestments, which is a legendary. So the mythic Forge Master links is going to be way, way higher up. Not only that, as the fire damage goes up in tiers, it's going to go way, way up on a mythic compared to a legendary. And as you guys know, I mean, the highest amount of damage you're going to get, once again, is from might. So if you're going for a DPS build, for sure, you're going to want to be using the Forge Master's links. Not too hard to farm, in my opinion. The Forge Master, once again, is probably one of the easier bosses to farm. The Flame Vestments are going to be your runner-up, and the reason for that is it's relatively easy to get. The Ember King drops it at 8% chance, as well as the Fire Mages will have a 2% chance to drop it. This also drops from a lot more areas than the Forge Master's links, which can only drop from the Forge Master. So this is going to be a lot easier to get. This one also applies a Fire Shield, and it is not when struck. I know that this says when struck, but when you cast, it has a chance to proc off of this as well. All right, so let's talk about rings. The Emberstone ring is going to be your best in slot ring for this build. Up until you get maybe a tier 3 Ring of Power or Ring of Cunning. Those are both very good, as well as the Abyssal, well, the Auric Alchem Band and the Abyssal Binding may also be better at tier 3. I have not received any of these yet, so I don't know. I don't know how well they scale as they go up in tier 3. However, from my experience, currently the Emberstone ring and or any equivalent ring that does plus elemental damage is going to be very strong, especially if it's giving you a main stat like might. Excuse me. This is going to be huge, and I would assume that the Emberstone ring is going to be better than the Abyssal Binding as well as the Auric Alchem bands, depending on what you're doing for your build, right? So this one is giving might and intelligence. It's also a legendary, which means this is not going to scale as high as your mythic rings, right? And that's where your weapons and stuff start to fall off. Now, same with the Abyssal Binding. This one is a mythic. However, it's going to make your health be a lot lower, which, in my opinion, once they rework in-game, this may not be as good, but will definitely be a good fill-in for the Emberstone. Now, two other rings that are also really, really good are going to be the Ring of Power or the Ring of Cunning. Now, the Ring of Cunning and the Ring of Power are very, very viable and may also be better than the Emberstone ring, but there is a caveat to that, right? The Ring of Cunning, if you're not maxed out on dexterity yet, may allow you to reach that goal. Especially if you have a ring and an amulet, you probably don't even need to put any points into dexterity at that point at tier 3 gear with those, right? And you may only need one of them to get to 100% crit rate, especially once you start to fill in your end game gear completely, right? When you start to get all your gear tier 3'd out. So this makes those rings very, very good, especially in game, because it's going to let you min-max per se. Now, we're going to move into amulets, and I think one of the better amulets is going to be the actual Red Dragon Eye. Now, the reason for this is it's giving pure damage. Now, pure damage is huge when it comes to your spells, right? Now, we can go look at the ring I currently have on my character right now, or not my ring, but the amulet. This amulet gives plus 336 pure fire damage. Now, as you can see, we're getting plus fire damage on all of our armor and our weapons and stuff like that. This ring, as you start to go up to tier 3, is going to go upwards to around 1,000 damage just from, not the ring, but from your amulet. I don't know why I keep calling it a ring. And that is going to translate to much, much more damage over time, especially since this also applies to your impacted areas. This is going to be, in my opinion, your best in slot. You're more than welcome to try out any other ones, or if you need to fill in some stats. The Red Dragon is, well, dragons past tier 2, once you are at level 70, are extremely hard. So the chance of you getting a tier 3 Red Dragon Eye prior to getting all tier 2'd out, and or even some pieces of tier 3, is going to be very, very hard, guys. So, but this, in my opinion, is going to be best in slot. Let's head back over and we'll take a look at some of the other amulets that may be viable if you're not able to get the Red Dragon Eye. Now, the Abyssal Chain is a little bit easier to acquire because the Admiral Blackbeard and the dead one are kind of easy to kill. Next runner up is a global loot. Well, not really global loot. It's on the Crystal Golem, would be the Orichalcum chain. Personally, once you start to get to like tier 2 gear, tier 3, this one is not as good as you would like it to be. It is pretty strong, but it's not as good as the others. We'll just put it that way. Now you also have your Amulet of Power, which is amazing, and your Pendant of Cunning, which these we've already gone over. They're very, very good. We aren't going to add any gameplay into this video because it's pretty straight, simple, very easy. You have 3 AoE spells. Once you have an Emberstone Staff, all 3 of those spells have the ability to, on damage, proc Burning Ground, which is what your Meteor procs, and they all will do very good damage, very standardized damage once you get to that point. So I don't see the point in adding that in because you guys will see it once you start to play with the builds yourself, right? It's very strong within reason. Once again, up until you get to level 70 plus, then it starts to fall off. However, keep in mind, all builds are subject to change with patches that are going to be released in the future. Now, any gripes or complaints you guys have heard may be fixed in later patches. This development team is developing the game actively. It's a 3-man team. They're doing the best they can. I'm just frustrated because I want to build a lot of different builds, and a lot of them aren't viable for endgame, at least not for a 6-man team endgame type of builds. So hopefully the developers don't take this in the wrong way, or any of my complaints or criticisms, and hopefully you don't as well, because like I said, they're active and they're doing the best they can. So you guys take care, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. See you guys later.